I woke up to the sound of my mother's voice cutting through the sterile hospital air like a blade, not asking if I was okay, not holding my hand, just standing there scrolling through her phone, saying the words that would change everything. "Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you've caused, Chloe?" My body ached everywhere. My left arm was in a cast, throbbing with each heartbeat. The fluorescent lights above me felt like tiny needles drilling into my skull. I tried to speak, but my throat was so dry that only a rasp came out. That's when I saw my father standing in the doorway, his face a mask of cold disappointment, and my sister Olivia sliding past him with that perfect expression of concern she'd mastered over the years. "The police said you were driving drunk," my mother continued, not even looking at me. "Speeding. They found a vodka bottle under the driver's seat, Chloe. What were you thinking?" I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that I hadn't been drinking, that something was terribly wrong with this whole picture. But before I could form the words, Olivia was there, taking my good hand in both of hers, her eyes glistening with practiced tears. "I'm just so glad you're okay," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I already talked to the police. I told them you just made a mistake, that you're not usually like this. I didn't want you to get in more trouble." There it was, the knife slipped between my ribs so smoothly, I almost didn't feel it at first. She was positioning herself as my savior, while simultaneously confirming to everyone in the room that I was guilty. My father finally spoke, but he wasn't talking to me. He addressed my mother as if I were already gone. "The car is totaled. At least it was Chloe's old Honda, and not Olivia's new BM. That's when something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like a hairline fracture spreading through glass. "Dad," I managed to croak out. "Olivia and I switched cars that night. I was driving her BMW. She was supposed to take mine." The room went silent. Then Olivia's face crumpled and she started crying. Real tears this time, or maybe just better acting. "Chloe, why are you lying? Why would you say something like that? You know I love you." My mother immediately wrapped Olivia in her arms, glaring at me with pure venom. My father stepped closer to my bed, pointing his finger at my face. "Shut your mouth right now. You've embarrassed this family enough. Your sister tried to help you, and this is how you repay her. Before you find out what happened next, if you're enjoying this story of betrayal and the fight for truth, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like this. Your support means everything, and I read every comment you leave. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 6 months before I woke up in that hospital bed, I was a different person. Or maybe I was just blind to who I'd always been in my family's eyes. I was 24 years old, working as a junior graphic designer at a small firm, barely making enough to cover my rent and student loans. I lived in a cramped studio apartment across town, while Olivia, 2 years older, lived in the spacious condo our parents had bought her in the nice part of the city. I'd always accepted this disparity as natural. Olivia was the golden child. She'd graduated summa cum laude from an Ivy League school, landed a prestigious job at a consulting firm, and was dating Ethan Blackwell, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in the state. I was the artsy one, the dreamer, the one who'd chosen passion over pragmatism. And according to my family, I was paying the price for that choice. But I loved them. God, I loved them so much. And I kept thinking that if I just tried harder, supported them more, proved my worth in other ways, they'd finally see me. Really see me. It started small. My mother would call, usually on a Sunday afternoon, and casually mention that Olivia needed help moving some furniture, or that the garden at their house needed weeding, or that they were hosting a dinner party and could use an extra pair of hands. I'd cancel my plans, drive the 40 minutes to their house, and spend my day off doing whatever was needed. They never offered gas money. They never said thank you. But I told myself that was okay because that's what family did. Then the financial requests began. My father's business had hit a rough patch. He said just temporary, but could I lend them some money, just a few thousand, to help with some unexpected expenses? I drained my savings, the small emergency fund I'd been building for 3 years, and handed it over. They promised to pay me back within 6 months. That was 18 months ago, and they'd never mentioned it again. When I finally worked up the courage to bring it up, my mother looked at me like I'd asked to borrow money from them. "We gave you life, Chloe. We fed you, clothed you, paid for your education, and you're worried about a few $1,000s. I'd felt so small in that moment, so ungrateful and petty, so I never brought it up again. Olivia used me differently. She'd call me late at night crying about stress at work or a fight with Ethan, and I'd stay on the phone for hours, comforting her, giving her advice, being the supportive little sister. But when I tried to talk about my own problems, about how I was struggling to make rent, or how lonely I felt, she'd cut me off within minutes. "I'm sorry, Chloe, I really am, but I have an early meeting tomorrow. We'll talk soon, okay?" We never did. The warning signs were there. I can see them now, looking back with eyes that have been forced open. But back then, I explained them away. I made excuses. I told myself I was being sensitive, that I expected too much, that this was just how families were. There was one person who saw through it all. Liam Chen had been my friend since college. We'd met in a design theory class, bonded over our shared love of obscure indie films and late-night diner conversations. He'd watched my relationship with my family for years, and he gently tried to point out what he saw. "Chloe, they don't treat you like an equal," he'd said once after watching my mother dismiss my opinion about politics at a family dinner. "They treat you like you're less than." I defended them, of course, made excuses, changed the subject. But his words had planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't quite dig out. The night of the accident started innocently enough. It was a Friday in late September, and I'd been invited to my parents' house for what they called a family meeting. I'd driven over after work, exhausted from a long week, hoping this wouldn't take long because I had plans to meet Liam for drinks later. When I arrived, Olivia's BMW was parked in the driveway, gleaming under the porch lights. My old Honda looked shabby next to it. Rust spots on the hood, a crack in the windshield I couldn't afford to fix. I parked on the street as usual. The good parking was always for Olivia. Inside, my family was gathered in the living room. My father sat in his leather armchair, my mother on the couch beside Olivia, who was practically glowing with excitement. Ethan sat next to her, looking uncomfortable but trying to smile. "We have wonderful news," my mother announced before I'd even sat down. "Ethan proposed to Olivia last night. They're engaged." I felt a genuine burst of happiness for my sister. Whatever our differences, whatever imbalance existed in our relationship, I wanted her to be happy. "That's amazing," I said, moving to hug her. "Congratulations." But my mother held up a hand, stopping me. "We need to discuss the wedding. It's going to be a significant event. Ethan's family is very prominent, and there will be important guests. We need everyone to be on their best behavior." There was something in the way she said "everyone," while looking directly at me, that made my stomach tighten. My father cleared his throat. "Chloe, your mother and I have been talking. We think it would be best if you maintained a low profile during the engagement period and the wedding events. We don't want any distractions from Olivia and Ethan." "What do you mean low profile?" I asked slowly. Olivia jumped in, her voice sweet, but with an edge I'd learned to recognize. "They just mean that maybe you shouldn't bring a date to the engagement party or the wedding. You know how you can be sometimes, drawing attention to yourself with your quirky outfits and opinions. This needs to be elegant and sophisticated." I felt like I'd been slapped. "My quirky outfits, Olivia. I'm a designer. I dress professionally." "Oh, sweetie," my mother said with that condescending smile. "We know you think that, but this is different. This is high society. We just want to make sure everything is perfect." The meeting continued for another hour, with them laying out expectations and rules for my behavior over the next several months. I felt myself getting smaller and smaller, my voice getting quieter, until I was just nodding along to whatever they said. It was only when my father mentioned that I'd need to contribute $5,000 toward the engagement party costs that I finally found my voice again. "Dad, I don't have $5,000. You know that. I can barely make rent." His face hardened. "If you had chosen a more practical career path like we advised, you wouldn't be in this position. Olivia is contributing $10,000, and her salary isn't that much higher than what yours could have been if you'd made better choices." What he didn't mention was that they'd bought Olivia her condo outright, that she had no student loans because they'd paid for her entire education, that they supplemented her income with a generous monthly allowance. The $5,000 they wanted from me represented nearly 4 months of my savings after rent and expenses. I don't know what made me agree. Maybe it was the weight of a lifetime of trying to earn their approval. Maybe it was the exhaustion of always feeling like I had to prove my worth. Or maybe it was just easier to say yes than to fight. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll figure it out." Olivia clapped her hands together. "Perfect. Oh, and Chloe, one more thing. I need a ride home. I came with Mom and Dad, and they're heading out of town tonight. You don't mind, do you?" Of course I didn't mind. I never minded. That's what I was for. As we walked out to the cars, Olivia paused, digging through her purse. "Actually, my car has been making this weird noise. I should probably get it checked out, but I don't have time this weekend. Could we switch cars? You can take mine to the mechanic on Monday, and I'll drive yours." Red flags should have been waving everywhere, But I was so used to accommodating her, so trained to say yes, that I barely hesitated. Sure, I guess that's fine. We swapped keys in the driveway. She got into my beat-up Honda with an expression of barely disguised disgust, and I climbed into her pristine BMW. The leather seats were soft, the car still had that new car smell, and the dashboard was like something out of a spaceship compared to my old Honda. For a brief, pathetic moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to have nice things, to be the daughter they were proud of. I drove Olivia back to her condo, helped her carry in some shopping bags, and then started the drive back across town to my apartment. That's when I noticed the time. It was almost 9:30, and I'd told Liam I'd meet him at 10. I'd have to rush to make it. The route back to my place took me through some winding roads on the outskirts of the city, an area that was being developed but was still mostly empty lots and construction sites at night. I'd driven this route hundreds of times, knew every curve and pothole. I was tired but alert, stone-cold sober, and going exactly the speed limit. I'd just passed a gas station, one of the last lit buildings on the stretch, when I saw the red and blue lights in the rearview mirror. My heart sank. I hadn't been speeding, hadn't run any lights. Maybe a taillight was out. I pulled over, heart racing, and watched in the mirror as two police officers approached, one on each side of the car. "License and registration, please," the officer at my window said, shining his flashlight into the car. "Of course. Is something wrong, officer?" I asked, reaching for the glove compartment. "We clocked you going 70 in a 45 zone, ma'am. Have you been drinking tonight?" "What? No, I haven't been drinking at all. And I wasn't speeding. I had my cruise control set at exactly 45. The officer's expression hardened. "Please step out of the vehicle." What happened next felt like a nightmare. They made me do field sobriety tests, which I passed. But then they searched the car, and that's when one of the officers held up a bottle of vodka, half empty, from under the driver's seat. "This yours, ma'am?" I stared at it in complete confusion. "No, I've never seen that before. This isn't even my car, it's my sister's." They didn't believe me, of course. Why would they? Everything in that moment pointed to a young woman caught driving drunk, making up desperate excuses. They arrested me right there on the side of the road, put me in handcuffs, read me my rights. I kept insisting it was a mistake, that someone had planted that bottle, but my words fell on deaf ears. The crash happened on the way to the station. A deer jumped out onto the road, and the officer driving swerved, but we were going too fast, and the cruiser clipped the barrier. The impact sent us spinning, and then everything went black. I woke up in the hospital with a concussion, a broken arm, and bruised ribs. The officers had minor injuries. And somehow, in the chaos and the confusion, the story got twisted. According to the report, I'd been driving Olivia's BMW, not sitting in a police cruiser. The vodka bottle became evidence of my impairment. The deer became my reckless speeding. And the accident became my fault. And that's how I ended up in that hospital bed, listening to my mother accuse me, watching Olivia play the concerned sister, and seeing my father prioritize a material possession over his daughter's well-being. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days. During that time, not one member of my family asked me how I was really feeling, what I remembered about the night, or whether I needed anything. They were too busy controlling the narrative, talking to lawyers about minimizing damage to the family reputation, and making sure this didn't affect Olivia's engagement. When they finally took me home, it was like being transferred from one prison to another. My father confiscated my phone and laptop immediately. "You're not going to make this worse by posting something stupid on social media," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I was kept in my old bedroom, the one I'd left behind when I moved out at 22. It felt like going backward in time, except now I was a prisoner instead of a child. They'd already called my boss and told him I was dealing with a family emergency and needed time off. I wasn't consulted about this. I wasn't part of the conversation. I was just a problem to be managed. Olivia would drift in and out of my room, sometimes seeming genuinely concerned, other times saying things that felt like little knives. "I can't believe this is happening right before my engagement party," she said one afternoon, sitting on my bed and scrolling through photos on her phone. "Ethan's family is so particular about reputation. His mother is already nervous about our family. This isn't helping." "I didn't do anything wrong," I said quietly. She looked at me with something like pity. "Oh, Chloe, even if you believe that it doesn't matter what's true, it matters what people think. And right now, everyone thinks you drove drunk and crashed my car." "Your car that you asked me to drive," I pointed out. Her eyes flickered with something there and gone so fast I almost missed it. Calculation, maybe? Or satisfaction? "I asked you to take it to the mechanic, not to go joyriding around town while intoxicated." She left before I could respond, and I sat there in the growing darkness of my room, feeling more trapped and alone than I'd ever felt in my life. That's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just accept this. I couldn't let them bury me to protect their perfect image. The problem was I had no phone, no computer, no way to reach anyone or prove my innocence. I spent 2 days trying to figure out my next move, going over and over the events of that night in my mind, trying to find something, anything that could help. On the third night, I made myself sick. I mean really sick, or at least made it look that way. I'd remembered reading somewhere that if you pressed hard on your stomach in certain spots, you could induce vomiting. It was painful and disgusting, but it worked. I made enough noise that my mother came running, found me in the bathroom pale and shaking. "We need to call an ambulance," I gasped. "Please, something's wrong." She looked annoyed more than concerned, but she called. And when the paramedics arrived, I quietly asked one of them if he could contact my friend Liam. I gave him the number, making up some story about him being my emergency contact and needing to know I was okay. The paramedic was young and sympathetic, and he agreed. At the hospital, they ran tests and found nothing wrong with me, but Liam was already there, having rushed over the moment he got the call. He managed to get a few minutes alone with me while my mother was talking to the doctors. "Chloe, what the hell is going on?" he asked, his eyes full of worry. "Your family said you were in an accident and then you disappeared. I've been trying to call you for days." I told him everything, keeping my voice low and urgent. About Olivia switching cars with me, about the vodka bottle I'd never seen before, about how my family was keeping me isolated and controlling the narrative. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "You need to get out of there," he said finally. "I need to prove what really happened first," I told him. "But I need help. I need a phone." He didn't hesitate. "I'll get you one. A prepaid phone, something they won't know about. But Chloe, you need to be careful. If what you're saying is true, if Olivia set you up, your family is more dangerous than you realize." Before he left, he slipped a small phone into my hospital gown pocket along with a charger. "I already programmed my number in. Call me anytime. And Chloe, we're going to figure this out." When my mother took me back home that night, I had a lifeline. It wasn't much, but it was something. I hid the phone and charger in an air vent in my room, somewhere no one would think to look during their random searches of my belongings, which had become a regular occurrence. Over the next few days, I started to piece things together. I called Liam during the nights when the house was quiet, and we planned. The first thing we needed was evidence. The vodka bottle was in police custody, and there was no way I could access it. But I remembered stopping at that gas station, the last one before the empty stretch where I got pulled over. "Can you go there?" I asked Liam. "Talk to whoever was working that night. See if they have security cameras." He went the next day. The manager was reluctant at first, but Liam could be persuasive when he wanted to be. He explained that I was his friend, that I'd been accused of something I didn't do, and that any footage might help clear my name. The manager finally agreed to let him review the tapes from that night. What he found was limited, but important. The camera angle didn't capture the moment Olivia and I switched keys, but it did show both cars in the parking lot. It showed Olivia getting into my Honda and driving away. It showed me getting into her BMW. It was proof that we had switched cars. Proof that I'd been telling the truth about at least that part of my story. Liam sent me still images from the footage through the burner phone. I saved them, my first real piece of evidence. But I knew it wasn't enough. It proved we'd switched cars, but it didn't prove Olivia had set me up. It didn't explain the vodka bottle or the false police report. I decided to confront my parents with what I had. It was a risk, but I was desperate. One morning at breakfast, with Olivia conveniently absent, I showed my father the images on the burner phone. "This proves that Olivia and I switched cars," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This proves I was driving her BMW because she asked me to, not because I stole it or went joyriding." My father looked at the images for a long moment. Then, without a word, he deleted them from my phone. Just selected them and pressed delete, his face expressionless. "Dad," I cried out, "those were evidence." "Evidence of what?" he asked coldly. "That you're still trying to drag your sister down with you, that you're making up conspiracy theories instead of taking responsibility for your actions. The police report is clear, Chloe. You were driving drunk. You caused an accident. No amount of grainy security footage is going to change that." "But I wasn't drunk." My voice was rising now, weeks of frustration and fear boiling over. "Someone planted that bottle, don't you see? Someone set me up." My mother walked into the kitchen, then immediately sensing the tension. "What's going on?" Your daughter is accusing Olivia of framing her. My father said, his voice dripping with disgust. My mother's face hardened. We are not doing this again, Chloe. We've been patient with you. We've protected you from the worst of this. But our patience has limits. That afternoon, things got worse. Olivia came home in tears, telling our parents that her diamond necklace, a gift from Ethan worth over $15,000, had gone missing. She didn't directly accuse me, of course. She was too smart for that. She just mentioned casually that the last time she remembered seeing it was when I'd helped her carry her shopping bags into her condo the night of the accident. My parents tore apart my room looking for it. They went through everything, my clothes, my books, even ripped open my mattress. They didn't find the necklace, of course, because I didn't have it. But the damage was done. Now I wasn't just an alcoholic who'd crashed a car. I was also a thief. I called Liam that night, sobbing into the phone. I can't do this anymore. They've destroyed everything I own looking for a necklace I never took. They're never going to believe me. Nobody is. Chloe, listen to me, he said urgently. Don't give up. There has to be something else, some other evidence. Think, is there anything from that night that we haven't considered? I tried to think through, my tears going over every detail. The gas station, the drive, the traffic stop, the crash. And then it hit me. The dash cam, I whispered. What? My car, my old Honda, it has a dash cam. I installed it a year ago after someone backed into me in a parking lot. It's one of those that records continuously whenever the car is running. My heart was racing now. Liam, if Olivia drove my car after we switched, if she did anything or said anything, the camera would have recorded it. Where's your car now? He asked. It's in the garage here. My dad said it's totaled, that insurance won't cover much because I was supposedly at fault. It's just sitting there. Can you access it? The garage is locked, but I know where they keep the spare key. My mind was racing now. Hope blooming for the first time in weeks. The camera's memory card might still be intact. Even if the car is damaged, those cards are pretty durable. Then that's what we need to get, Liam said. But Chloe, you need to be careful. If your family realizes what you're doing, I did know, if they caught me, things would get even worse. But this was my only shot at the truth. I waited until 3 a.m. The house was completely silent. I'd spent the evening pretending to read in my room, listening to the sounds of my family preparing for bed. My mother's television finally went quiet around midnight. My father's snoring started shortly after. Olivia wasn't staying over tonight. Something about needing to be at Ethan's family's estate early the next morning. I crept down the stairs in my socks, avoiding the third step that creaked, and made my way to the kitchen, where my parents kept various spare keys in a drawer. I found the garage key, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The garage was detached about 20 feet from the back door. I'd have to cross the yard in the open, hoping none of the motion sensor lights would wake anyone. I took a deep breath and moved. The night air was cold October, sliding into November. I made it to the garage without incident and slipped inside. My car was there, looking worse than I'd imagined. The front end was crumpled, the windshield shattered. For a moment, I just stared at it, imagining what could have happened if I'd actually been driving, if the accident had been worse. Then I remembered why I was there. I called Liam on the burner phone. I'm in the garage. Walk me through this. He'd done research. The dash cam is usually mounted on the windshield. Look for a small black box, probably about the size of a deck of cards. The memory card should be in a slot on the side or bottom. The driver's side door was jammed, but I managed to get it open with enough pulling. The interior smelled like mold and something chemical from the airbags that had deployed. I found the dash cam still attached to the shattered windshield, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought it might be too damaged to be useful. But when I finally got it loose and examined it in the light of my phone, I found the memory card slot. The tiny SD card was still inside, looking miraculously intact. I've got it, I whispered into the phone. Good, now get out of there and hide it somewhere safe. I was halfway back to the house when the motion sensor light clicked on, flooding the backyard with brightness. I froze, my heart hammering, waiting for someone to look out a window for a door to open, but nothing happened. After a few seconds, the light went off again and I ran the rest of the way inside. Back in my room, I hid the memory card in the same air vent as my phone, then lay in bed too wired to sleep. I had it. I had potential evidence, but I had no way to view it, and I couldn't risk sending it to Liam through the mail in case my parents discovered it. The next morning, I faked another illness this time, claiming stomach cramps. My mother, exasperated, agreed to let me see my doctor, probably hoping he'd prescribe something to shut me up. At the doctor's office, I managed to pass the memory card to Liam, who'd been waiting in the parking lot. He slipped me a note in return. I'll call you tonight. The rest of the day dragged by in agonizing slowness. When my phone finally rang late that night, I nearly dropped it in my haste to answer. Chloe, Liam's voice was shaking. You need to hear this. You recovered the data. My friend Marcus, he's a data recovery specialist. He works with damaged memory cards all the time. The card was in good shape, actually. The files are mostly intact. He paused. Chloe, what's on here? It's worse than we thought. My blood ran cold. What did you find? The camera was recording when Olivia got into your car. The video is a little shaky at first, but then it clears up. She sat in the driver's seat and looked directly at the dashcam like she knew it was there. And she smiled, Chloe. She smiled and said, time to teach the little brat a lesson. I couldn't breathe. My sister had looked at the camera, had known she was being recorded, and hadn't cared. That level of confidence, of arrogance, it meant this was planned. Carefully, deliberately planned. There's more, Liam continued. After she started driving, she made a phone call. The audio picked it up. She was talking to someone and she said, It's done. She'll take the fall for everything. Dad won't have to worry about her ruining your engagement party anymore. Dad, I repeated numbly. She said Dad. Chloe, I think your father knew about this. I think he might have even been part of planning it. I felt like the room was spinning. All of it had been a setup. Not just the accident, but everything. They'd wanted me out of the way, wanted me discredited and powerless, so I couldn't be an embarrassment during Olivia's big social season. And they'd been willing to destroy me completely to make it happen. Send it to me, I said, my voice hollow. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I need to see it. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. He sent the files to my burner phone. I watched them in the darkness of my room, the screen casting a blue glow on my face. There was my sister, beautiful and poised and utterly cold, speaking those words. There was the phone call, her voice clear and unbothered as she discussed how I would take the fall. I watched it 3 times, and with each viewing, something inside me transformed. The hurt, the betrayal, the desperate need for their approval, all of it was burning away, leaving something harder in its place. They'd tried to destroy me. They'd conspired to ruin my life, to paint me as a drunk and a thief, to eliminate me as a problem. Well, I thought, watching my sister's smiling face on that small screen, if they wanted to see what I could do when pushed too far, I'd show them. Over the next few days, I formulated a plan. I couldn't just go to the police. My family had money and lawyers. They'd find a way to discredit the evidence or tie it up in court for years. And even if I won eventually, the damage to me would be permanent. No, I needed something more immediate, more devastating. I needed to destroy the thing they cared about most: their reputation, their precious social standing. The engagement party was scheduled for 2 weeks away. It was going to be a massive event at the Grandview Hotel with 200 guests from the city's elite. Ethan's family would be there, business partners, society reporters, everyone who mattered in their world would be watching. And I was going to give them a show they'd never forget. I started planning in earnest. First, I needed to make my family believe I'd given up. I started being more compliant, more subdued. When my mother criticized me, I just nodded. When my father lectured me about responsibility, I apologized. When Olivia talked about her party planning, I listened quietly. I'm glad you're finally accepting reality, my mother said one afternoon. It's about time you grew up. I smiled at her, a small, defeated smile. You're right, I've been acting childish. I just want to move past all of this. She looked almost satisfied. That's good to hear. Maybe once Olivia is married and things settle down, we can help you get your life together. Maybe find you a job with better prospects. A job they controlled, she meant. A life they monitored. But I just nodded again. 3 days before the party, I made my move. I went to my parents with what I hoped was a convincing performance of contrition. I want to do something for Olivia, I said, for the engagement party. I know I've caused so much trouble and I want to make it up to her. My mother looked skeptical, but my father seemed intrigued. What did you have in mind? I'm a graphic designer. I could create a video presentation for the party. Photos of Olivia and Ethan set to music, something elegant and romantic. It could play during dinner or during the toasts. A gift from me to show that I support her happiness. They exchanged glances. I could see them calculating, weighing whether this was genuine or some kind of trick. But in the end, their arrogance won out. They couldn't imagine I was capable of hurting them, not really. I was the weak one, the failure, the one they'd broken and controlled. That's actually a lovely idea, my mother said finally. Olivia would appreciate that. I'll need my laptop back to work on it, I said, keeping my voice humble. And maybe access to Olivia's photo albums to get the right pictures. My father retrieved my laptop from his office where it had been locked away. You can work on this, but we'll be checking your internet history, no social media, no reaching out to anyone. Understood. Understood, I said meekly. That night I got to work. I did create a video presentation exactly as I'd promised. Beautiful photos of Olivia and Ethan, romantic music, tasteful transitions. It was genuinely well done, the kind of thing that would make guests reach for their tissues. I saved it as engagement presentation final, MP4, and showed it to my parents the next day. It's perfect, my mother said, actually smiling at me for the first time in weeks. Olivia is going to love this. What they didn't know was that I'd created a second file identical in name, but with a small difference in the file extension that would be nearly impossible to notice unless you were looking for it. This second file started exactly like the first one. Same photos, same music, same romantic montage for the first 3 minutes. Long enough for everyone to relax, to settle in, to think they knew what they were watching. And then the screen would go black, and the truth would begin. I'd worked with Liam to edit the dashcam footage, to clean up the audio, to make sure every word was crystal clear. I'd added subtitles for anyone who might not hear it over the dinner conversation. I'd made it impossible to misunderstand or misinterpret. The morning of the engagement party, I woke up feeling strangely calm. This was it, the point of no return. Once I did this, there would be no going back, no reconciliation, no family to return to. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, I realized I was okay with that. The family I'd been trying so desperately to belong to had never really existed. It had been an illusion, a pretty picture with rot underneath. The party started at 7. I arrived with my parents and Olivia in my father's Mercedes, wearing a simple navy dress that my mother had approved. Understated, she'd said. You need to blend into the background tonight. This is Olivia's moment. The Grandview Hotel's ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, a string quartet playing classical music. Guests milled about in evening wear, champagne glasses in hand, the air filled with polite laughter and the clink of expensive jewelry. I recognized faces from society pages, business leaders, politicians. This was the world my family aspired to, the world they'd do anything to be part of. Ethan's parents, Richard and Caroline Blackwell, stood near the entrance greeting guests. They were exactly as I'd imagined, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, perfectly cold. When my family approached, I saw Caroline's smile falter just slightly as her eyes passed over me. She'd heard the stories, no doubt. The drunk driving the accident, the troubled younger daughter. I was the stain on an otherwise perfect picture. Olivia looked radiant in a white cocktail dress, her hair swept up the infamous diamond necklace around her throat. She'd found it apparently right after my room had been destroyed, looking for it. It had been in her coat pocket the whole time, she'd said, with an embarrassed laugh. Just a silly mistake. My parents had never apologized for tearing apart my belongings. I stayed quiet during cocktail hour, blending into the background as instructed. I watched my sister work the room, charming everyone, playing the role of the perfect bride-to-be. I watched my parents bask in reflected glory, introducing Olivia and Ethan to important contacts, building their social capital. At 8 o'clock, guests were invited to take their seats for dinner. I'd been placed at a table in the back, far from the main action, with some distant cousins I barely knew, and a few of Ethan's co-workers who'd drawn the short straw in seating arrangements. I didn't mind. I wanted to see everything that was about to happen. Dinner was served, multiple courses of food I barely tasted. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought everyone must be able to hear it. The video presentation was scheduled to play during dessert right before the toasts. My father had the laptop with him at the head table, ready to start the presentation on the large screens positioned around the ballroom. Except the laptop he had wasn't running my original file anymore. During the chaos of arrival, while everyone was greeting guests and taking photos, I'd managed 30 seconds alone with the laptop. 30 seconds to swap the files. That's all it had taken. Dessert arrived, some elaborate confection that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My father stood up, tapping his champagne glass for attention. The room quieted. Before we begin the toasts, he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom, we have a special presentation. Chloe, Olivia's sister, has put together a video tribute to the happy couple. Chloe, would you like to say a few words? This wasn't part of the plan. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to stand, to walk to the front of the room. Every eye was on me. I could feel their judgment, their curiosity about the troubled sister, the black sheep of the perfect Anderson family. I took the microphone from my father, my hand steady, despite my racing heart. Thank you, I said, my voice clear. Family is everything, isn't it? It's supposed to be the people who love you unconditionally, who support you, who would never hurt you. I paused, looking directly at my parents, then at Olivia. Tonight, I want to give my sister a gift, the gift of truth. I nodded to my father. He pressed play. The video started exactly as everyone expected. Photos of Olivia as a child, as a teenager, beautiful and smiling. Photos of Ethan, handsome in his prep school uniform at his college graduation. Photos of them together, looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. The music swelled, romantic and sweet. People smiled. Some reached for their napkins, ready for happy tears. I saw my mother beam with pride. I saw Olivia squeeze Ethan's hand. And then 3 minutes and the screen went black. The music stopped. There was a moment of confusion, guests looking around, wondering if there was a technical problem. My father reached for the laptop, but I'd already moved behind him, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Just wait," I said quietly. The screen flickered back to life. But it wasn't more romantic photos. It was dashcam footage, the interior of a car, the timestamp clear in the corner, showing the date and time from that night in September. And there was Olivia sliding into the driver's seat, looking directly at the camera with that cold smile. Her voice rang out through the ballroom speakers, crystal clear. Time to teach the little brat a lesson. The room was silent. Completely, utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The video continued. Olivia starting the car, pulling out of the parking lot. Making a phone call. Her voice so confident, so casual. "It's done. She'll take the fall for everything. Dad won't have to worry about her ruining your engagement party anymore." I watched the color drain from my father's face. I watched my mother's mouth open in horror. I watched Olivia stand up so fast her chair tipped over backward. "Turn it off," Olivia screamed. "Turn it off right now." But no one moved. Everyone was transfixed, watching the truth unfold on the screens around the room. Watching Olivia laugh about framing me, about planting evidence, about making sure I'd be blamed for everything. The video ended. The screen went black again. And then my voice came through the speakers, calm and measured. "That's the night of my accident. The night my sister left me on the side of the road and let me take the blame for her crime. The night my parents helped her cover it up." I took the microphone again, walking to the center of the ballroom. Olivia was crying now, mascara running down her face, but these weren't the pretty tears she could turn on and off. These were tears of panic and rage. "Everything you just saw was recovered from the dash cam in my car," I said. "The car my sister borrowed that night. The car she used to plant a bottle of vodka under the seat before calling the police with an anonymous tip about a drunk driver. The same sister who accused me of stealing this." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the diamond necklace. The necklace I found in the pocket of the coat she was wearing the night we switched cars, the coat she left in my closet. I walked over to where Olivia stood frozen and placed the necklace on the table in front of her. "I'm done being your scapegoat. I'm done being the family embarrassment. I'm done sacrificing my life so you can have your perfect one." Ethan had stood up now, staring at Olivia like he'd never seen her before. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did you really do this to your own sister?" Olivia reached for him, but he stepped back. "Ethan, please, it's not what it looks like. She's lying. She's always been jealous of me, of us. This is all fabricated." Fabricated. I pulled out my phone, the burner phone Liam had given me. I have copies of everything, the police report that was filed under false pretenses, the medical records from my hospital stay that my parents kept from me, the financial records showing the $5,000 they demanded I contribute to this party while I was struggling to make rent, all of it documented, all of it true. Caroline Blackwell stood up, her face a mask of icy fury. She walked over to my parents' table. "Richard and I came here tonight believing we were celebrating our son's engagement to a woman of character and integrity. Instead, we find our families have been brought together under circumstances that are frankly appalling." "Caroline, please," my mother began, but Caroline held up her hand. "I don't want to hear it, Susan. What your daughter did was criminal. What you did in covering it up was unconscionable. And if you think for one moment that the Blackwell family will be associated with this scandal, you're very much mistaken." She turned to Ethan. "We're leaving, now." Ethan looked at Olivia one more time. I saw something like pity in his eyes, but also disgust. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can't do this. My mother is right. This is too much." He walked away, following his parents toward the exit. Half the ballroom stood up to follow them, clearly wanting no part of the disaster unfolding before them. My father lunged at me, then his face purple with rage. "You've destroyed everything," he roared. "Everything we've built, everything we've worked for. You vindictive, selfish little..." Mr. Anderson, a new voice cut through the chaos. I turned to see two police officers entering the ballroom with Liam right behind them. We're going to need you and your daughter Olivia to come with us. We have some questions about filing a false police report and obstruction of justice. Liam had called them just as we'd planned. He'd sent them copies of all the evidence before the party even started timing it so they'd arrive right after the video finished playing. Perfect timing to see the reactions of everyone involved. My father looked like he might have a heart attack. My mother had sunk into her chair, covering her face with her hands. And Olivia, my beautiful, perfect sister, was sobbing as one of the officers began reading her rights. I walked over to where Liam stood. He put his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into him, feeling the adrenaline that had been sustaining me finally start to drain away. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I will be," I said, and I meant it. As my family was escorted out of the ballroom, followed by a crowd of horrified guests, and several people with phones out recording everything, I stood there in the ruins of their perfect party and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. The aftermath was brutal, but necessary. The video went viral within hours, despite my family's attempts to suppress it. Someone at the party had recorded the whole thing on their phone and posted it online. By morning, it had millions of views. Olivia was charged with filing a false report, evidence tampering, and a handful of other crimes. My father was charged as an accessory after the fact for helping cover it up. My mother wasn't charged, but the court of public opinion was harsh enough. Their social circle evaporated overnight. My father's business partners distanced themselves. The family name that they'd valued so highly became synonymous with fraud and deception. Ethan never spoke to Olivia again. He released a statement through his family's lawyer expressing his shock and disappointment and wishing me well in my recovery. The engagement was obviously called off. I moved in with Liam temporarily while I figured out my next steps. The police cleared my name completely, expunging the false charges from my record. The insurance company that had denied my claim reversed their decision and paid out for the accident. With that money, I was able to get a new car, a small but reliable sedan that was actually mine, not a hand-me-down, not something I had to beg for. I also started therapy, real therapy with a psychologist who specialized in family trauma. It was hard confronting all the ways I'd been manipulated and gaslit over the years, accepting that the parents I'd loved had never truly valued me. But it was also healing. 6 months after the engagement party, I had my first solo art exhibition at a small gallery downtown. It wasn't anything huge or fancy, but it was mine. The centerpiece was a sculpture I'd created from pieces of my old car, the one that had been destroyed in the accident. I'd taken the broken metal, the shattered glass, the twisted parts, and turned them into something beautiful, something that spoke of destruction and rebirth, of breaking apart and coming back together stronger. I called it Resurrection. Liam was there for the opening, along with friends I'd neglected during the years I'd spent trying to earn my family's approval. People I'd pushed away because they'd tried to tell me the truth I hadn't wanted to hear. They welcomed me back with open arms, and I realized these were my real family. The ones who loved me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. My parents tried to reach out a few times. Letters mostly that I returned unopened. My mother left voicemails talking about forgiveness and family as if she were the wronged party. I deleted them without listening all the way through. I didn't owe them my time or my emotional energy. Not anymore. Olivia served 6 months in jail and was placed on probation. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to another state afterward, trying to start over where no one knew her story. I hoped she'd learned something from the experience, but honestly, I didn't care that much either way. Her life was no longer my concern. What mattered was my life, my future. For the first time in 24 years, I was living for myself, making choices based on what I wanted, not on what would make someone else happy or proud. I was discovering who I was without the weight of their expectations and disapproval crushing me. I dated a little casually, learning what it felt like to be with someone who respected me as an equal. I took up painting again, something I'd loved as a child, but had abandoned because my father said it wasn't practical. I traveled just small trips at first, weekend getaways, to places I'd always wanted to see. Each journey felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. A year after the engagement party disaster, I got a job offer from a prestigious design firm in Seattle. It was a big move across the country from everything I'd known. The old me would have been terrified, would have asked permission, would have worried about what everyone thought. The new me said yes without hesitation. On my last night in town, Liam and I sat on the roof of his apartment building, looking out at the city lights. "Thank you," I said. for believing me when no one else did, for helping me when I had nothing, for being the brother I actually needed. He smiled. You did the hard part, Chloe. You stood up, you fought back, you saved yourself. I just held the ladder while you climbed out of the hole they'd put you in. Still, I said, I couldn't have done it without you. You could have, he said. It just would have taken longer. You're stronger than you ever gave yourself credit for. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd always had this strength inside me, just buried under years of being told I was wrong, I was inadequate, I was the problem. Maybe all I'd needed was one person to say, I believe you, to unlock it. Seattle was everything I needed. A fresh start in a city where no one knew my story, where I could build a life based on my own terms. I threw myself into my work, creating designs that reflected who I was, becoming bold, unapologetic, authentic. My portfolio grew, my reputation grew. I started getting offers for freelance work that paid more than my salary. 2 years after leaving, I opened my own design studio. It was small, just me and 2 other designers, but it was mine. We specialized in branding for small businesses and nonprofits, helping people tell their authentic stories. Every client who walked through my door was someone trying to build something real, something honest. I understood that drive now in a way I never could have before. I still thought about my family sometimes, not with anger anymore, or even with sadness, just with a kind of distant observation, like looking at strangers through a window. I'd see a news article occasionally about my father's business struggling, or I'd hear through the grapevine about Olivia's latest failed relationship. I felt nothing. They were characters in a story I'd finished reading, no longer part of my narrative. What I'd learned from all of it was this. Some people will never value you the way you deserve. They'll take and take and take, and when you have nothing left to give, they'll blame you for being empty. The love you think you're earning through sacrifice and submission isn't real love. Real love doesn't require you to destroy yourself to prove your worth. I also learned that walking away from toxicity, even when it's wrapped in the word family, isn't weakness, it's survival, it's self-respect. It's choosing yourself when no one else will choose you, and that choice, that moment when you finally say no more, is where your real life begins. The old Chloe died in that hospital bed, listening to her mother's accusations and her sister's crocodile tears. The new Chloe was born in the ruins of an engagement party, speaking truth into a microphone, while her family's carefully constructed lies crumbled around them. It wasn't the rebirth I would have chosen if I'd had a choice. It was painful and public and messy, but it was necessary. And looking back now, standing in my own office, in my own apartment, living my own life on my own terms, I wouldn't change a thing. They wanted to break me. Instead, they freed me. And that's the greatest irony of all. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. If you're in a situation where you're constantly sacrificing yourself for people who never sacrifice for you, if you're always the one apologizing while they never take accountability, if you feel smaller and less worthy every day despite doing everything to earn their love, you're not crazy. You're not the problem, and you deserve better. It's terrifying to walk away. I know that. The fear of being alone, of losing the only family you know, of proving them right, that you're not good enough, it's overwhelming. But I'm here to tell you that what waits on the other side of that fear is worth it. Freedom is worth it. Self-respect is worth it. A life where you're valued and loved for who you are, not for what you provide, is worth it. You're worth it. So what about you? Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic family members or people who constantly took advantage of you? How did you find the strength to walk away? And if you're still in that situation, what's holding you back? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone in this struggle is enough to give us the courage to take that first step. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in impossible situations. And remember, your story doesn't end where they said it would. You get to write your own ending. And trust me, the one you write for yourself will be so much better than the one they had planned.